let's see. This is essentially what you're going to be creating, just kind of this jazz festival poster. And there's a variety of things that you'll do with this that make it, it's what InDesign is really used for as far as putting things together. You've got a variety of pictures, you've got a variety of text. Some of this text will be in different little text frames, and you'll link up these frames. And you'll also be putting pictures inside of picture frames and editing and applying special effects to those as well. So I'm going to start off with just kind of the basics. Here's the number one problem, the number one questions I get the most confusion about. So I want to make sure to go over it and that you understand this as well. When working in InDesign, you've got frames for everything. So if you want to put a picture in something, it's got to have a picture frame. If you want to put text in something, it's got to have a text frame. And for this one, no different. What I've got here, what kind of frame is this? How do you know what it is? Yep, you got the blue X, so it's a picture frame. Obviously, there is no picture inside of it. As with Illustrator, every object, every frame that you have has a fill color and a stroke color. So in this case, on your screen, the gradient is kind of choppy. On mine, it looks really good. But the fill color for mine is just this gradient going from orange to yellow. And the stroke, or the outline, is also a gradient, in this case going from yellow to orange. So you've got those two things to juggle. In InDesign, one more thing you add is the content to it. So I'm going to drop in the picture that needs to go inside of this one. File and place, and I believe it's the sunset. Yeah. So we're going to place this picture inside of it. So the picture goes into the picture frame. It still has the fill color of the gradient in the background. As a matter of fact, I can select my picture and move it around, and it stays inside of the frame that we're working on. I can change the size of my picture. So think of it kind of as a normal picture frame, right? You've got a picture that you can put inside of a frame, and that picture can be, in this case, way too big, or you can even make it way too small. And it still works inside of that as well. Cool? For this particular project, you're going to be asked to open up the effects palette. And the effects allow you to do different special effects and also some common effects to it. Do notice, however, when I select just the object, so the object is the frame and its contents by itself, I can do things like I can change up its blending mode, I can even change up the opacity. So if I drop the opacity of this by 30%, notice everything in it. The stroke, the fill, everything drops the opacity as well. Let's bring it back up to 100%. Same thing if I change my blending mode. So if I change that to multiply, oh, nothing happened, or at least it looks like nothing happened. Why did nothing happen?
Because there's nothing behind it.
Nothing behind it, bingo. So let's see, I'm going to move it here and I'll put this behind that. So let's change that back to multiply. So now I've got something behind it, so it's going to multiply within it. Let's see, I'll turn that back to normal. For this project, you're actually going to have to select not just the whole thing, but the content. And this is where the effects comes in handy. So if I click on the little black arrow, I can open it up. Now I can change up not just the entire object, but the stroke or the fill by itself. So let's zoom in. So let's say I selected the stroke. It's set to normal 100%. I can drop the opacity of just the stroke. And you can see now, here it is on the edge. The stroke is at an opacity of 40%. I can select my content, click on the little circle or double click on it. Now I'm in graphic mode. I can drop the opacity of the content itself by a certain percentage. Everything else stays the same. So when working in InDesign, the main thing to kind of juggle is you're not just the frame or the object, but also what's inside of it, your editing as well. I think for this one, you're going to be changing the blending mode of this to screen. So now the object inside of it is screening with the color that's behind it, and you'll be applying a special effect to that. Does that make sense? It'll make a lot more sense. I think I've got a couple of questions on the last couple of quizzes. By the way, the Project 8 quiz is now opened up, so you can take it and work through it. Here's what I really want to show you, because you can do a lot with clipping paths that the book doesn't even cover. In this case, you're going to be placing a picture inside of kind of this Jazzman outline that they give you. The file that they give you is an Illustrator file. So automatically, what does that tell you? What kind of file is this? Vector. It's a vector-based file. So if I was to open it up, I should be able to see all my little outlines, and I can change it up. There's no pixels related to it as well. So vector is what I'm working with. Let's place it inside of a picture frame. Made a picture frame. We're going to place my little jazz man inside of here. And this is what he looks like. He's just black and white. As a matter of fact, he's not even black and white. If I was to place him on top of something, he's just one solid color. Because he's vector, he doesn't have a white background. His background is automatically transparent. That's kind of another advantage of using vector graphics. Whereas if this was a JPEG or if this was rasterized, it would have to have a white background. And a lot of people want to know, how do I get rid of my background? Well, making it a vector file is one quick and easy way of creating that. Let's say you didn't have a vector file. I'm going to show you how to use the clipping path. Clipping path, yes. There's a clipping mask in Photoshop, which is totally different. So I downloaded a picture, I believe, of a flower on my desktop. Where did I save it to? Make sure I got it. There it is. So I got this blue dahlia that we'll place inside of it. Command D to drop it in. And it's pretty small. Let's make it a little bit bigger. Hey, what keyboard shortcut did I do to make that bigger on the fly? Do y'all remember that? It's Shift and Command. If you hold those down, Shift and Command, it will scale it as you drag out. If you don't hold it, you're just dragging out the size of your frame. Okay, so that was neither here nor there. So if I place this on front of it, this is what I get. I get a white background that I'm working with. So if I go to Object, down to Clipping Path, I can actually tell the computer, and I'll open up the options, to look for the contrast, a good white background. And by default, the type that I'm going to use is to detect the edges. I'm going to detect the white and dark edges around this picture. And I can play around with the threshold or the tolerance to determine how many pixels. Notice that it's giving me the little vector points. And it's automatically clipping out that edge by itself. So if you are working with images that are raster based, they got bunches of pixels on it, make sure it's got a good white background, and then you can create a clipping mask and mask out that particular edge as well. So that's one way of doing it. So you've got a vector that'll automatically give you that transparent background, or if you've got a white background, you can tell it to detect the edges from there. There's a third way. What if you don't have a picture? Something like these flowers. These flowers don't have a white background, so let's drop these in here and see what happens with it. Let's make a new Command D. There they are. And I'll scale it down to fit inside my text frame. If I did it this time, I want to get rid of the green that's behind here. I just want to see my flowers within this picture. Object, Clipping Path. We'll open up the options. This time, if I do Detect Edges, it's not really picking up anything. If it does, it's actually picking up the flowers inside. Why is that? You guys tell me.
It's the closest thing to white.
Exactly. It's the closest thing to white. It's the lightest area. And I'm telling it to just pick up the light areas. Well, that's what it's going to do. So it's not exactly what I'm looking for. If you have an image like this, this is where Photoshop comes in handy to work with. So I'm going to delete away this one. Let's open up our image into Photoshop. And this is where some understanding of Photoshop comes in handy when working with InDesign. So I've got my 3 different flowers, and I've also opened up my Paths palette. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use my quick selection tool, and I'm going to select each of the flowers. Just clicking and dragging will quickly select the area. So, got it all outlined. Didn't do too good of a job. I could do better if necessary. At the bottom of my paths palette is this button. Will convert whatever selection I have to a working path. So when I click on it, here's what I get. I get my working path, and actually I can go with my little vector tools, and if I zoomed in, you can see here's my little vector points, and y'all had to draw those off when creating, I believe it was the African. Y'all seeing what I'm seeing? Oh, there we go. Is it unfrozen now?
Yeah.
There we go. So there's our vector path. In my paths palette, here's my working path. So I'm going to save this one as flower 1. We'll say, okay, let's do the same thing for the other ones. Grab your selection tool. Let's select out this flower. At the very bottom, make a new path. By default, it's going to call work path. Double click on it. We'll call it flower 2. We'll say that okay. And select this third flower. Click and drag. Got it selected at the very bottom. We'll make a third working path. Double click, flower 3. Okay, so I've got them all saved. Why'd you do all this, Mr. Ivy? I've got 3 different flowers that have 3 different paths I can work on. Let's save this as a Photoshop file. So it's File and Save As. The Photoshop format will save not only my layers I'm working in, but also any paths or any adjustments that I make. So that's why I'm choosing my Photoshop format. We'll call this 3 flowers. Save it to the desktop. Now let's jump back into InDesign. I'm going to load it up again. This time I'm going to place the 3 flowers photograph that I just edited inside of here. Looking good. Let's go to clipping path this time. Object. Let's clip out the background now. This time, I have an option to save my Photoshop paths. All those different flowers that I created, when I select them, well, here's the flower 1 path. Here's flower 2. Here's flower 3. You can choose to make your own clipping paths inside of Photoshop, or actually you can do it inside of Illustrator as well. And once you save them, here's how you can change those up and vectorize them from there. Say OK, and now I can use that as a clipping path within my design that I'm working for. So 3 different ways, 3 different methods of thinking about transparency within your image. If it's got a white background, let it detect the edges, or if it's automatically vectorized, it'll give you your transparent background as well. Pretty cool? Okay, so that's your sermon for today.